one.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So thank you very much. Hello, Tracy and everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I would like to be there in that wonderful country, but I am now working in Basel, Switzerland, and I had something to do this weekend here. That was a pity. And also my English crashes with the German, so I apologize if it is not the Shakespeare's one. I'm not like Emil, who speaks all the language. He's a living Pentecost, so to say. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation and your patience. My relation, I think, is a bridge between what Alejandro Sada told us yesterday and what maybe Oscar is going to tell us in the following relation. And the title of my relation is Logos und Weltethos, Creation, Nature and Environment, according to Joseph Ratzinger, Benedict XVI. It was on the 22nd September 2011, sorry, my German comes in my head, when Benedict XVI went straight to the podium. After making a mistake about the location, he had to be prompted by the president of the German parliament, the famous Bundestag. He was playing the part of a distracted professor. Then he began his contribution. Basing myself on this international responsibility that I hold, he asserted, I should like to propose to you some thoughts on the foundations of a free state of law. Without proposing actual solutions, he went directly to the core of the matter. He spoke more as a Herr Professor than as a Roman pontiff. In fact, Pope Ratzinger paid tribute to those who had attempted to boycott his speech with some riots against the papal visit in the Brandenburg Gate. He said that the Ecologist members of Parliament, Die Grüne, had been able to pay attention to nature and reality. This self-proclaimed exclusivity, he asserted, the positivist reason which recognized nothing beyond mere functionality resembles a concrete bunker with no windows, in which we ourselves provide lighting and atmospheric conditions, being no longer willing to obtain either from God's wide world. The windows must be flung open again. We must see the wide world, the sky and the earth once more and learn to make proper use of all this. Ecologists were on the right track, but they hadn't yet reached to the very origin, the creative act of God, as have been said by many different religions. The beginning of creation by God could then set a more solid foundation for the respect for the natural environment. To better understand these papal words in the Bundestag, we must take a look at the background of Joseph Ratzinger's thought. In the beginning was the Logos, reflected Joseph Ratzinger in 1984. This ancient and venerable proposition that we have heard frequently is no longer evident in our days. Goethe's Faust says of it, "This is such a difficult translation that I will give it another sense if the Spirit will enlighten me. And at the end, he translated, in the beginning was action. Physicists say now that in the beginning was the Big Bang, a big original explosion. But now if we stop to reflect on it, we arrive to the conclusion that in the end, none of these answers, action or big explosion, are sufficient. So we turn back to the biblical logos. To understand it, we need to read the entire phrase. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. This profound maxim means that since God existed in the beginning, God is the beginning. All things come from the Creator Spirit, from God who created. The first paragraph is titled The Three Senses of Logos. Alejandro spoke yesterday about four, but maybe the pure reason and the practical reason can be joined in one. I'm going to do now a theological reading following the prologue of John's Gospel. The Logos of St. John can constitute one of the points of departure in the theological thought of Joseph Ratzinger. As he frequently says in the work, when God is called the Logos, it means that in the beginning there was a God who is thought and meaning, seen. That is, a thinking creator who called the world into existence and who, with his calling, and at the same time moment, gives a meaning. Reason is, in this way, the foundation on which the entire universe is supported, the root from which we come, within which we are exist, and in which we can trust. But the Logos, specified the Bavarian theologian, is thought not in the sense of a complicated mathematical formula that dominates the universe and which remains deaf and indifferent to our demands. On the contrary, this God, who is truth, love, spirit, and thought, is word, and so is also relationship, Zuwendung, and a new beginning for all of us. Thus, in the beginning, in creation, reason, freedom, and love are profoundly united in such a way that the term Logos represents a richness of content and meanings that we are going to analyze in the lines that follow. The first one is Logos as eternal word of the Father. The beginning was the Logos. Before the origin of everything, there was the eternal word. This is the first and fundamental meaning of the term Logos, a strictly theological meaning referring to the divinity. In the first lines of the prologue, John speaks about the Word and his relationship with the Father who is God. The two are identical. The Logos is also God. Today it is generally admitted that the idea expressed here by the term Logos does not stem from Platonic thought, but is best represented in the Hebraic term Nemra, word. As it is well known, the Church Fathers saw in the Logos of St. John a clue to understand the eternal procession of the Word. Saint Augustine applied this parallelism in a clear way. As my word reached your comprehension without being in my mind, in corde meo, in this way the word reached our mind without leaving the Father. My word was inside me, and because a voice, the divine word, was in the Father and became flesh. This line of argument underwent further development in subsequent Western theology. The Logos that founds all of reality is the eternal word of the Father. This is the trajectory of Ratzinger's exegesis of St. John's prologue. In the beginning was the Logos, the creating reason, the energy of God's intelligence, the communicatory force of meaning in the divine knowledge. Only from this starting point can we correctly understand the mystery of Christ, in which reason is made visible as love. The first expression of faith says to us, all that exists is thought made reality. The Creator Spirit is the origin and the beginning that founds all things. The Creator Spirit is rational in his origin because it comes from the creating reason. Reason and relation, logos and dialogos, thought and word, knowledge and communication, truth and love, Christ and his Spirit, in the end, are united in God. This complementary binomial reflects and projects the divine persons. Ratzinger pays great attention to the principle of the Logos, even to such an extent that he is going to be accused of logocentrism. But this Logos will be always, as we have seen, a Logos agapicus, a reason love, a verbum spirans amorem, as has been named by Augustine and Thomas Aquinas. The second meaning, Logos as truth and meaning. The parallelism between the first verse of Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the words of St. John's prologue is well known. Creating begins when God uses words. And God said, let there be. The Logos is creating word. Through him, all things were made, John 1:3. There is a perfect correlation between creation according to the Logos and its result, which remains as the meaning and the interior truth of all created things and persons. We are now moving from a theological level to a gnoseologic and metaphysical one. Joseph Ratzinger reminds us frequently of the contemporary needs to speak about the meaning of creation. Perhaps this is because nowadays is a forgotten dimension, because now the human being is presented as creator of himself, leaving in the background the fundamental fact that in the beginning was the Logos, according to which all things were created. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. John 1:3 again. The beginning existed, the thought that created for love according to his own image. God created mankind in his own image. Genesis 1:27. So there is a veltetos founded in the reality and its origin, and not only in the consensus. And the third meaning, Logos are reason and relation. And the Logos was made flesh. John 1:14. Thus creation receives the trace of the eternal Logos. This trace shows, in our opinion, that Ratzinger applies in an analogical way the term Logos, also in a special manner in the human person. Logos has these three different levels of meanings: theological, gnoseological, anthropological, metaphysical. We are going now to this third level. He and she have been created in the image and likeness of God, that is according to the divine Logos. We have arrived now at the anthropological metaphysical level. In the 6th century before Christ, Heraclitus defined man as Logos and placed him between the divine Logos and the cosmic Logos, the object of knowledge and the word of the human being. This analogy will be taken up later by Aristotle, who defined as son logon echon, translated variably as homo loquens and homo sapiens, that is, as a rational being who possesses the word. Reason and language appear here as fundamental capacities of human person. In fact, thought crystallizes in the word. More than simply giving it garments, the word sculpts and gives form to the ideas. Word and thought, dialogue and reason, love and truth are two basic conditions of the human being, according to the image and likeness of their creator. Here there is a third sense of the term Logos, which has at the same time a double meaning: reason and relation, thought and word, knowledge and communication, which our theologian puts as the basis for the most important capacities of human being. The second paragraph is titled Ratzinger and the Creation. Today we speak frequently about ecology, climate change, and sustainable development. It is almost a fashion, but it was not a distant topic for the Archbishop of Munich and Freising, Joseph Ratzinger, in the 80s of the past century, I mean. Nature has also stood in the middle of his interest since his origins. In his childhood and youth, he was very interested not only in ethics, but also in natural sciences. There is also a document which contains typed notes of the lessons with the title Sophium's Lehre, assigned to Joseph Ratzinger and dated in Münster in 1964. At the same time, he has always held fast to the idea of human nature and natural law, even if at times the latter goes by different names. This law, according to the Logos, the interior meaning of each entity that composes the reality, can be reached rationally, and not only through religion and revelation. In this sense, Ratzinger is a big epistemological optimist. In fact, the Logos becomes a key concept for understanding the person and his mission in the world. The human person, thus and divine birth, has been created in the image and likeness of God the Creator, as we have noted, and this implies a special status and responsibility in the world. Thus, the human person receives a definitive impetus derived from creation itself, This, according to Ratzinger, has been a forgotten dogma, the great Cinderella of theological uses. In the beginning, God created, Genesis 1:1. Let us go then to Ratzinger's texts. Back in 1974, when his academic career was in its infancy, Ratzinger researched the Christian concept of creation. He rejected both monism and dualism. Christianity embraced neither materialism and spiritualism, nor the opposition between them. After making reference to the central ideas of love, reason, and freedom in God as origin of the world, that is, God's personal element is present from the first moment, Professor Ratzinger mentioned that the faith in creation, Sophus Glaube, arises from an amplification of the first commandment as a specification of the layout and ordination of human destiny. God and creation, there is a binding knowledge that in certain sense conditions all our existence as well as our relationship with the world. Ratzinger recalls the Christological sense of creation that is present in John 1:3. Everything was made according to him. Before redemption, it was creation. And the Lord of history comes after the creator of the world. Our world is the raising and purifying of nature by grace. In the same way, this faith in creation is united in an inseparable way to the concept of natural law applied to the human being, although it is the concept that can be reached through united reason. But in specific difficulties, revelation can give light in a complementary way. To illustrate this point, Ratzinger refers to Jesus' teachings about the familiar stability. What the order of creation lays down, at least in an unequivocal way of Mark 10:1-12, and about this the Catholic theology has never doubted. In this way, the concept of nature, in Ratzinger's opinion, is intimately united to the idea that we have of creation, and at the same time, it is reinforced by other truths revealed by Christian faith. Ratzinger concludes by rejecting any form of positivism of faith. We need a consistent understanding of human nature that we can also share without non-believers. That is because at that time, Professor Ratzinger considered the doctrine of creation as one of the most important topics in Christian preaching. In another article of 1968, the German professor studied the relationship between creation and evolution, trying to reconcile the doctrine contained in Genesis with the theories formulated by Charles Darwin. Regarding the purpose of creation of the human person, he concluded, the consideration that man has been created by God in a more direct and specific way than the rest of the creation signifies only, to put it graphically, that man has been loved by God in a special way. not only as a being that exists, but also as one who knows him, not only as a form that he has thought, but also as an existence that can also think of him. The mood was converted in man in the moment in which a creature can be formed for a first time in a nebulous way by the idea of God. The first Jew that, as stammering as it was said to God by a human mouth, signals the moment in which the Spirit manifests itself to the world. It is the crossing of the Rubicon in the process of creation. Man is dust, which has received the breath of the Spirit according to the tale of the Genesis 2:7. The human person is earth that has been formed and called by God in a special way. So the natural and animal condition of human has been elevated by a specific act of love and freedom by God. God created mankind in his own image, Genesis 1:27. In a similar vein, in a Salzburg address in 1979, Cardinal Ratzinger said that in the theological debate of recent times, decades, the issue of creation has developed a very specific role. It has been as a topic without anthropological implications. Nevertheless, the issue has recently become of great importance both in culture and society. The years of the petrol crisis lead to the first ecological moments, as we are now in this moment, against the limited capacity of creativity of man, who understands the world as a matter that creates himself. It is the creation by God. Not everything depends on man, and going against nature is to show off the branch in which we are sitting. But in order to construct an effective defense of nature, we need a firm foundation. The question, what we can do, is based on who are we? The question of being conditioned, our hopes in the future. Nevertheless, there is no consensus about creation. In fact, modern thought has changed our way of viewing it, as Ratzinger later demonstrates in his analysis of the ideas of Bruno, Galileo, Luther, Hegel, and Marx. The reduction of God to a being who writes with mere mathematical signs ends up emptying the meaning of creation. Either grace annuls and suppresses nature, everything is grace, or it is forgotten that love is the original font of all creation. For Christian, God is the creating reason, a reason who loves, a reason and a love which precedes us. Nonetheless, in the above mentioned modern developments, the concept of creation is substituted by that of nature, which at the same time is no more than the object of the sciences of nature, and any other meaning of this word could be seen as a contradiction. In this sense, there is no way one can speak about natural law or human rights because they correspond deep down to an empty category. In some way, a person is based only on his freedom or on emptiness, on nothing. Another possibility proposed by Rousseau is the presumed return to nature, in which all traces of freedom disappear and the spirit is considered as an illness of nature. On the contrary, Christianity has elected reason and love, logos and agape, as the origin of creation, not the cause, but the cosmos, ordained and created by reason and love. Christian love as faith in the Creator must be united to self-acceptance as part of creation. It conceives of all creatures as dependent on an original love, freedom, and truth. This heteronomy does not destroy liberty, but gives it all its sense and meaning in love. It is the summit of freedom. In this sense, man is dependent. He cannot live without dependence on others and trust in them. So he continued to say, this dependence is not alienation when we are speaking about love, because it is an enriching relationship that changes our being and freedom. It makes it wider and large. This is the Liebe-Prinzip which Ratzinger proposed. We exist thanks to the foundation of love. Elio spoke us very eloquently about this topic yesterday. Some years later, Archbishop Ratzinger returned to the theme of creation in a series of Lenten conferences pronounced in 1981 in the Cathedral of Munich. There he drew attention to the neglect of this doctrine in contemporary Christian thought. Some time ago, the theologians said that the creation had become an unreal concept, and from the intellectual point of view, we cannot speak about creation, but about mutation and selection. Against this skeptical point of view regarding the truth of creation, Archbishop Ratzinger defended the symbolic value of the biblical tale, at the same time making reference to the Babylonian myths. But he says, what is said in the Bible, he says, is that there is a creator God, a creating reason. It is the challenge of faith that against the pagan myths, it speaks about the light of the truth and teaches us that the universe is not produced by a struggle of dark forces, but from reason, the reason of God, and is bound to the word of God. In this sense, the tale of the creation means a real enlightenment for history, a rupture with the fears that have dominated all men. The world is not absurd or meaningless. God, that is love and truth, reason and freedom, once again, is the origin of everything that has been created. Only if the universe proceeds from liberty, love, and reason, only if those are the dominant forces, can we trust each other, advance towards the future, and live as persons. Beyond randomness and necessity, there is love, sense, and freedom, maintained once and again Ratzinger. There is no sense in living in a world where atheism and non-belief propose absurdity and meaningless as the only explanation of our existence, concluded the Bavarian cardinal. He tried to find an answer and an orientation. For this, he turned back to the scientific premises. After avoiding the statement of scientists Laplace, Einstein, and Monod, he pointed to the true origin of God's law, which is absolutely not contrary and tyrannical. What is more, natural law is not something exclusive for Christians. It can be reached through reason and conscience. So it constitutes an ethical patrimony also shared by Jews and Muslims. For example, the Torah, the law, is the expression of the history that Israel lives with God. It is an expression of the alliance, and the alliance is an expression of God's love, of a yes to man, whom he has created for loving and being beloved. Later, Ratzinger spoke about the polemical divine commandment, dominate the earth, Genesis 1:28. In order to avoid abuse and exploitation, man must follow the law and the word of God. Then man will become a creative being, a co-creator, a contributor to God's creation. It is appropriate to the Christian way to have the certainty that we are creative and thus creators, only if we are united to the creator of the universe. We can only serve the earth truly when we make use of it according to God's word. Love and truth in the beginning. Finally, our theologian spoke also about the human condition, which finds itself between God and the rest of the world. Man was created from earth, but he is formed especially in God's image, we have said. In him, earth and heaven touch. God enters creation through man, and man has been called by him. Each person is known and beloved by God, is God's image, Imago Dei. The religion inspiration of these lines adds a new dimension to what we can know by pure reason about nature and natural law, giving them a wider and more luminous aspect. But it does not destroy their value, because God plays a decisive role here. The human person has a specific value. So today we can say with greater certainty and joy, yes, the person is a project of God. Only the Creator Spirit was strong, large, and brave enough to conceive this project. The person is not a mistake. He and she have been desired, have been loved, and they are fruit of one love. They can discover in their interior the dating project that they are in the language of His Creator Spirit, who speaks to them and encourages them to say, "Yes, Father, you have loved me." The person participates in an elevated mission given by God, and he becomes the subject of the prediction of the same creator. The problem that arises in the dialogue with non-Christian thought is a common morality possible? Weltethos, is it possible? Or is the Decalogue an exclusive Christian prerogative? Faced with the difficulty of this universalist endeavor, the possibility of a Weltethos, Cardinal Ratzinger proposed in a debate with Jürgen Habermas in 2004 that the answer must be found not only at the level of ethics, but also in the mutual relationship between reason and religion, natural and religious ethics. We have seen, he concluded, that there are highly dangerous pathologies in religion that require the light of reason as a sort of control system by which religion must let itself be purified and regulated again and again, as even the fathers of the church have noted. But these considerations suggest, and humanity today in general does realize it, that there are also pathologies of reason. The arrogance of reason, hybris, is not less dangerous. It is perhaps more so if we consider its potential effects, whether it be the atomic bomb or the objectification of the human person. Thus, reason also must be asked to recognize its limits and to listen to the major religious traditions of humanity. If it considers itself as totally independent and rejects its capacity to learn, the interrelationship becomes destructive. Excuse me. He concludes that only after this reciprocal purification between reason and religion will be in a position to take part in a dialogue with other cultures. As Ratzinger argued in a discourse with another agnostic intellectual, ethics will ultimately be the winner in this exchange. In my debate with the philosopher Flores Arcais, we arrived at this point, the limits of consensus. This philosopher could not deny that there are values that not even majorities could contradict. But which ones? At this point, the moderator of the debate, Kat Lerner, set out this question: why not take the Decalogue as a rule? It is not just the private property of Jews and Christians. It is an elevated expression of the moral reason that is in accordance with the wisdom of all the great cultures. To adhere again to the Decalogue might be essential precisely for regenerating reason, for giving a new impulse to recta ratio. Ratzinger concludes by proposing reason as a fundamental premise for peace in the world, changing a phrase of Hans Kuhn, the founder of the Weltethos theory. Kein Weltfriede ohne Religionsfriede. There will be no world peace without religious peace. I must say that without peace between faith and reason, there cannot be peace in the world, because without peace between them, the wellsprings of morality and law will dry up. In this sense, we will find an answer some years later. The third and last paragraph is the Bundestag speech. And these are the senses that are used, for example, in Ratzinger's Theology of Creation or in the Bundestag speech. Let us see, for example, a text of those historical words. The German Pope then went further, speaking about a human ecology, the ecology of human person, ecology des Menschen. That is the second meaning we have said before. In fact, we need both interior and exterior ecologies, interior and exterior nature, and both must be respected and harmonized. Man too has a nature that he must respect and that he cannot manipulate at will. Man is not merely a self-sufficient freedom. Man does not create himself, he reiterated. His intellect and will, reason and freedom, but he's also nature, and his will is rightly ordered if he respects his nature, listens to it and accepts himself for who he is, as one who did not create himself. In this way, and in no other, is true human freedom fulfilled. Each person must listen to the voice of the nature that dwells within him. If he is able to hear it, he will be also able to speak at the same language as nature. The Apostle Paul spoke about the law that is written in our hearts, Romans 2:14. The openness of conscience to the language of being, the formatting of a docile heart must be achieved according to the Emeritus Pope by listening to the language of one's nature. This is one of the requirements of our time. In this context, Jano and Brouwer have spoken about the ecological movement as a sign of a new postmodern sensitivity, which at the end is in agreement with the precept of God in the beginning, but it is something more than an ecological spiritualism. Nevertheless, ecology, and this was Benedict's proposal, must widen its commitment to include an understanding of human being, since it too has a nature that must be respected. In this way, and in a mode of speech in keeping with contemporary sensibilities, the Pope revisits the connection between nature and reason that for centuries have been used to support the rationality of natural law. There is a link which passes through causes, and this is the third meaning, and depends on its openness to the being and ultimately to God, to the Logos. This is the first meaning. Let us come back to the fundamental concepts of nature and reason from which we set out. The great proponent of legal positivism, Kelsen, at the age of 84 in 1965, he continued, abandoned the dualism of is and ought. I find it comforting that rational thought is evidently still possible at the age of 84, mentioned Ratzinger quietly, alluding to his own age. Previously, Kelsen had said that norms can only come from the will as a sacred formulation of juridical positivism. By nature, Kelsen-Dixit later, would presuppose a creator God whose will have entered into nature, so a veltetos is possible. And the creation has its origin in love and freedom, reason and sense, we have repeated once and again. Any attempt to discuss the truth of this belief is utterly futile, he concludes. And at the end of this dialogue with Kelsen, Benedict XVI asked, "It is really pointless to wonder whether the objective reason that manifests itself in nature does not presuppose a creative reason, a creative spiritus." The answer is still blowing in the wind, in that fresh and clean Nordic wind that you maybe have there in Helsinki, and in the wind that blows today in the solemnity of Pentecost. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you, Father Pablo. And we have a little bit of time if somebody would like to make a comment or ask a question.
Yes, of course.
Yes, Professor Roland.
Father Pablo, if someone was to ask, how would you distinguish Pope Benedict's concept of Weltethos from Hans Kuhn's? What would you say?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because he mentions this topic, but he does not use it personally because it's a bit little confusing. That's because Hans Kuhn grounded this Weltethos in consensus. And as we have seen, Ratzinger is firmly rooted in reality, and that reality comes from God. So we can say that, that's my opinion, maybe I'm mistaken, but what Ratzinger does is to give a good foundation to Hans Kuhn's proposal, because otherwise this consensus can change with the time. And maybe we consider that human life must be protected, but the consensus can go also in the opposite direction. So what we need is this ecology dimension, this inner ecology, the ecology of the human being. And this ecology is founded in nature, and this nature is deeply founded in God. I do not know if I have
Thank you.
answered.
I think it was a good answer.
Okay.
Thank you. And I will now stop the recording for this session, and you can still stay with us, I hope, for the next talk. And we will set up Oskar's talk here so that we can begin at 6.
Okay, thank you. See you.
No, you can stay there, but I'm just stopping the recording. Bye bye, thank you.